follow your heart, not so much your head, but your heart, and not be afraid because there's just so much beauty and magic and wonder awaiting you on this path. It's really about developing a deeper relationship with the consciousness of plants and with the earth, which is what we all need. We don't need to be constantly, on this, consumption-based train that we're on as a society, because that's not sustainable. We really have to return back to the earth.
Hello, and thanks for tuning into Power Perspectives, People, Passion, Purpose. I'm Shannon, and today I'm extra excited. I get to speak to an expert guest, a plant medicine integration coach and microdosing facilitator, man after my own heart here. As a former leader in corporate tech with a PhD in psychology, he spent years in high-pressure environments like Meta and Airbnb until his inner voice got too loud to ignore. He turned to plant medicine, which not only healed deep layers of trauma, but awakened a purpose. Since those catalyzing experiences, he's supported hundreds of purpose-driven souls in using microdosing not as a trend, but as a sacred practice for the nervous system, for healing, creative flow, and soul remembrance. With a unique blend of trauma-informed coaching, spiritual insight, and practical science, he demystifies the microdosing path. No fluff, no spiritual bypassing, no psychedelic elitism. He leads programs, retreats, and one-on-one mentorships that help people reconnect to their body, deepen their purpose, and remember who they truly are. Thank you for sharing your power perspective with us, Dr. Eric Russell.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be part of your podcast.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so excited. And as I was sharing with you before I hit record, just microdosing is something really special to me. I've seen so many people heal with it, and to be, talking to a doctor and someone that's had your particular experiences, I'm really excited to learn from you and to help viewers learn from your experience and your wisdom also. So before I get into kind of a little bit more about your background, can you describe some of your psychedelic education, and not necessarily the one you got from an institution, but the one that you got from the hard yards, maybe the ego deaths, or telling aspects of your ego to sit in the corner and shut up while you ask your pain some important questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, most of my education around psychedelics and plant medicines actually came from my own healing journey. Because when I began healing and began diving deeper into myself, I started becoming more aware and attuned to the spirits of plants, of fungi, and really started developing a deep reverence and relationship with them over time on my own healing journey. And of course, I was curious around how I could deepen this relationship, and also how I could potentially help other people or heal other people on this path. And so I just used the internet to reach out to potential guides, organizations, and until I landed on one organization in particular who I work with now. They're called Plant Medicine People, and they're an amazing company and organization that hosts so many different courses on plant medicines, so many different trainings of how to be a psychedelic and plant medicine integration coach. And also they host amazing retreats in Costa Rica. And I've done a few of those, and they've been like life-changing. But what I did with them is I reached out to them initially, and I asked, like, hey, is there a way for me to expand my kind of skill set or my understanding of plant medicines more broadly? Because I not only have a scientific foundation for my own like academic education, but I also want to learn more about the shamanistic and like spiritual perspectives of plant medicine as well. So that organization, the CEO of that organization, Kat, she's one of their lead teachers and educators. She brought me on, and she gave me a full education around plant medicine and certified me as a plant medicine integration coach. And from there, I also reached out to a particular woman. Her name is Danielle, and she is the president of the San Francisco Psychedelic Society. And she began and she founded, I think, one of the first microdosing facilitator trainings for, prospective facilitators that want to facilitate microdosing. And so I was one of the first people to sign up for that training as well. And so I got certified in being a microdosing facilitator with that training. And so it was like those combined trainings that gave me like a really good foundation of how to continue expanding and like facilitating this work. But I did have like a good amount of just experience already on my own healing journey.
Wow, I have like 100 questions that just came up, but let me dial myself back. So your degree, your doctorate was in social and personality psychology.
That's
That
right. Yeah.
that's incredible, right? It's like you're already primed to be so curious and such a seeker of like what's in here and how does it all connect? Why are we here? All of the big questions. So, I mean, we can't connect the dots looking forward, only backward, but if you could kind of see what you're at now and having taken all these trainings, um, did you know that you would be on this path of trying to help people figure themselves out by figuring yourself out?
That's a great question. I feel like at first I felt like I needed because I always going about like, getting a good education and going about like the entire, university system and graduate school and all of that stuff. I thought I always had to seek education like outside of myself, right? And so after my PhD program and going through like the corporate world, I initially thought like, oh, obviously I want to shift my career. The next step is to seek information outside of myself first. But I quickly started to realize that that's probably not the best way of learning learning things from this path, because when I started working with psychedelics and plant medicines personally, I started there was just so much like learning and healing that needed to happen before I started actually reaching out to facilitators and coaches and all that stuff to deepen my understanding with like the practices, because it really began with me healing myself before I wanted to seek support from the outside. And so I think for anyone wanting to go down the path of being a plant medicine integration coach, it's really essential to work with the plants and really understand how to um, address or connect with our own healing path and understand it. So that way we're prepared to coach other people who come to us with that kind of same desire to heal. Because if we don't heal ourselves, how are we going to heal, other people? So that's kind of what I realized on my own path. It was like really important for me to start healing myself before I even, took a first step into, getting a formal education around plant medicines, shamanistic perspectives, and all that from other coaches to become a plant medicine integration coach.
Wow, yeah, and it's such a rabbit hole to go down. And even, I mean, I liked when we were discussing, like in your bio, you avoid the spiritual bypassing of things, and I've been down that path myself of literally just I need more education about this. I need to learn one more thing, and I need to take this next ceremony and this next ceremony and talk to this shaman and someone validate me and approve of what I'm doing. And it's really important to this is the work is you're in class with yourself. So I really like that was your driver that you saw early on. And I like that this episode, it's not just going to be for people that want to learn more about microdosing. Maybe they're curious, maybe they're sitting on the edge, but also for microdosing coaches or people that are aspiring coaches. So just as an introductory kind of foundation, can you share for you, what is microdosing and what is microdosing coaching? What are the benefits?
Yeah. Great question. So, microdosing, what I would say the definition of microdosing is taking a sub-perceptual amount of a psychedelic substance, or I could say also taking a sub-intoxicating dose of a plant medicine. And this simply means the dose is low enough where you don't like experience full psychedelic effects or it affects like your day to day, but high enough so it still gives you that kind of tweak in your perception or your perspective on your day to day. So an example could be like you're going about your day pretty normally, but then you just get this like really cool insight that comes to you and you're like, huh, that's an interesting idea. Or you start to feel like this certain emotion in an interaction with one of your friends, and you're like, oh, that's a really nice thing to feel. So it's like little novelties that appear in your day to day with microdosing. It's not like you are high by any means. You're not taking the psychedelic substance or the plant medicine to get high by any means. It's really subtle. It's a really sub-perceptual dose, and that's essentially what microdosing is. Microdosing isn't meant to disrupt your day. It isn't meant to take you out of anything or make you feel like you can't handle a social interaction during your day. Because, like, for example, I've worked with a few clients who are just like, I don't think I'm going to microdose today because I have a big meeting with my coworkers and I don't want to seem too out of it. And I'm just like, oh, well, let's talk about that for a little bit, because a true microdose, you shouldn't feel out of it with your coworkers. In fact, you should be really like arguably more dialed into the conversation, but let's talk about dialing down your dosage because it sounds like you're taking a little bit too much.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I encounter with my clients who go about their microdosing process sometimes. But in regards to the second part of your question, which was remind me of the second part
Um,
around, it was like
so
microdosing
yeah,
about.
what about coaching? Why would someone benefit from having a coach as opposed to try to learn the
Hmm.
dance themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question because coaches are super valuable because they provide that feedback and they provide that perspective that you may not have in the moment, like when you're microdosing or you're going about your microdosing process. So it's always essential when you're going about microdosing initially to solicit feedback from other people to get a sense of how is it that you sense me changing? What do you notice that's different? And of course, you can go to friends, family members, all of that stuff, but it's really handy to go to a coach trained in microdosing because they can kind of pick up like what kind of blind spots they're seeing, what kind of things that um, they're noticing in the client's field that are changing or shifting, and kind of tweak their awarenesses or make them more attuned to things that are actually coming out depending on their intention for the microdosing protocol. So that's like one thing. Another thing that's really handy for coaches is to keep clients accountable for their because I've seen a lot of clients try to up their dosage too quickly or go about the process kind of hand wavy or not as consistent as they could be. But a coach keeps them really accountable, consistent, and that's really a huge benefit of it because consistency in microdosing is really key because the more you're consistent in a protocol, the more that your system really starts to become attuned to that pattern. Because if you start to microdose inconsistently, for example, if you start dosing on just your more challenging days, your days that you feel that, oh my gosh, it's going to be really stressful, I'm just going to take a microdose today. Well, that's training your nervous system that you're going to basically take something to mitigate stress. And so essentially over time, your nervous system is going to learn that it's going to need that microdose to mitigate that stress, not just on like the more quote unquote normal days or the easier days that you have that you're like, oh, I don't really need a microdose today. But like on my stressful days, I might need it. So that's training your nervous system to expect some sort of mitigating agent for stress, which is very parallel to the pharmaceutical industry. So when we talk about, microdosing, it seems like a lot of people are going into microdosing, and this is something that I educate around, is we don't want to go into microdosing trying to mitigate or avoid certain emotions that we feel or certain stresses that come up, because microdosing is meant to help us get to the root of those things and potentially help us feel them. Well, some people don't want to feel a lot of those things. They want to avoid. And so they go to microdosing to help avoid those things rather than help them like kind of work through it. And so I would say a large I would say a good percentage of the microdosing consumer population is actually using microdosing in this way. And so, us as coaches, we have to really remind people and educate people around how to go about the process in a responsible and reverent way.
That's great. And it was, I mean, again, I'm being called to ask you specifically about because a lot of people are using microdosing as a mitigation, as a crutch, or they at least
Mhm.
aren't aware that that's what they're doing. They want to get off of antidepressants, off of benzodiazepines, off of, their SSRIs, whatever else that isn't working for them. And then this is kind of replacing it. Now that we know has to be done safely, with intention, with carefulness. So do you find that more and more people are coming to you to get help getting off of their antidepressants? And how do you help them kind of wean their way off of that, taper down?
Yeah, great question. I would say I do experience a lot of clients coming to me asking how to wean off their SSRIs, because SSRIs are essentially, in my opinion, and what I've experienced from people around me, is that SSRIs kind of remove or kind of mitigate all of the symptoms related to like depression, anxiety, and because of that, it kind of tampers people's mood a little bit and kind of makes people a little bit more um, like not like themselves. And so I think they're looking for another alternative to really return back to themselves. And that's why they're kind of approaching microdosing in this way. They're really wanting to have like find another solution to like wean off of those SSRIs. And also the scientific literature has been showing that SSRIs are no more effective than a placebo. And so there's been this essentially lie throughout the research community for years saying how effective SSRIs are at mitigating anxiety and depression. But in the long term, they're actually not effective at all, according to some new research that has kind of come out around SSRIs. And so, from an experiential perspective, but also from a scientific perspective, the SSRIs just really are not like a good choice for a lot of people. And of course, I'm not like a MD psychiatrist, so obviously people have to consult with like their own doctor, psychiatrist when weaning off medications. But I do experience a lot of people having that issue and coming to me. But what I usually recommend first for people is exactly what I just said is, have you worked with your psychiatrist, your doctor to discuss weaning off of that certain medication? And that's number one, because I, as a microdosing coach, I'm not like a certified MD with that degree. I'm not a doctor that can actually do that. So I really always have people to consult with their primary care provider before doing anything like that. But how I can support clients through that process is really ask them, what types of things have they been feeling on their SSRIs? What do they want to be feeling? And how can we start, including little bits of microdoses along that path? And usually for people who have been on SSRIs for years, they usually have a higher tolerance to psilocybin. So they typically have to take a little bit more than the typical microdoser. So it might be twice or three times the amount, because the SSRIs have really caused within the brain, like maybe a little bit more of a tolerance or resistance to the psilocybin. So usually for a lot of those people, the protocol has to be a little bit different to account for all of those years of taking SSRIs. But usually it's like a slow and gradual process with people kind of I recommend weaning off consulting with their primary care provider, weaning off those medications first, and then kind of going into the microdosing protocol little by little and seeing like what the changes are, what they've been feeling, how is it different, just kind of experimenting with that kind of initial 30 days before really getting um, like into the rhythm of consistency with like sticking to like a standard protocol. So I kind of do a little bit more of a um, uh, an approach of letting them kind of wean off of those medications first with their primary care provider, and then me coming in as a support system to help them understand what they're feeling and how to proceed further.
Thank you for that. I have all these mixed emotions about the necessity of the disclaimers that we have to provide, with also the feeling of like the irony of how depressing it is that antidepressants aren't as effective as they're supposed to be, is how they've been claimed to be, and how that's not in service of people's greatest health and well-being in what, the healthcare system is supposed to be doing for us. But
Yeah.
I think this is another aspect highlighting why having a microdosing coach is really beneficial. That accountability, and just when people need to release these emotions of coming off of something and going on to something else that is more, it's Mother Nature. You want to have a vent, you want to talk to someone, you want to be able to process those emotions. And
Mhm.
having that person there that isn't your partner, your family member, that's got these preconceived notions about how your life is supposed to be, and all of those, it is really beneficial. But thank you for that. And
Yeah.
for people that are sitting on the fence with microdosing, really like, oh, I want to, but they've maybe still got the misconceptions about, the war on drugs, the Nixon administration, the DARE programs that were like frying an egg about your brain. I don't know if you were in that part of the generation.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would your advice be if someone's asking you, like, what do you think, Dr. Eric? Like, I'm really curious, but what helps you reassure people?
Yeah, that's a great question. In this situation, I usually leverage my background in research because
Right.
since I'm a PhD psychologist, I have a lot of training in reviewing peer-reviewed science and research. And so, one of the things that really helps people who are on the fence, a little bit cautious around getting into the microdosing world because of all of that propaganda
Yeah.
around psychedelics and microdosing and kind of all that brainwashing is to really reassure them of the scientific benefits of microdosing. So show them the scientific literature on the benefits of microdosing, how it's actually not what people think. Like there's all these published, like tons of published literature now on like the creativity benefits of microdosing, the mood enhancement benefits of microdosing, how it's like really good for ADHD. And there's like even books like James Fadiman, who's one of the grandfathers of microdosing, has written like books and books and compiled so much research on the topic. And so my job as a microdosing facilitator, but also like a PhD, I have the training to provide people tons of literature and research to reassure them that this is could be a beneficial path for them given all the scientific data. And usually people who are kind of in have been in the box thinkers for a while, who are very analytical but also need kind of that scientific data to prove anything.
Mhm.
Giving them that scientific data helps. It helps them change their perspective because if you meet them where they are and provide them the data, provide them the research, and give them like a really good summary of all of the different benefits that microdosing can provide, it really starts to sway their opinion and starts to kind of make that little tweak in their mindset, being like, oh, okay. Well, if like all of these scientists are saying this, I guess I could probably get on board. And
Yeah.
so so gradually, that's how I've been finding to really help people see how microdosing can be beneficial for them.
Yes, that's awesome. And when you were sharing that, I just had this reminder of an experience. the ceremony in Guatemala, but I was speaking with this mathematician, very logical, very analytical, and before he hadn't experienced the mushrooms before in a ceremony, and was just like, okay, well, I anticipate this, and based on these findings, this and this and this. And I'm like, all right, sure, but also you may experience source energy talking to you, may experience yourself being one with all things. And he just kind of like, okay. And then after he dancing around the fire was like, I know God now. It was such a like, if you know, you know too. And then once you get past that need to analyze it, and then you feel it with all of your being, you're like, okay, if you know, kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, and I even came from that perspective as well. Like I came from a very conservative environment living in Texas for 27 years. And before I moved out to California, I was, in that mindset of like drugs are bad. You should not take any sort of like plant medicines or psychedelics. They can ruin like your life or like damage your brain. Like I was completely in that camp. But because I have a PhD, because I really value science and understanding insights from that discipline. I was, when I was met with like the insights and saw the news around the science on psychedelics and the benefits of it, then I'm just like, oh, well, let me look into this a little bit more. And so that kind of gradually got me a little bit more open to exploring psychedelics and plant medicines. And so for me, that was really how I broke open and really started, trying microdosing for myself. I saw that the validation from science to then like proceed with, because I saw it as like something safe to pursue because of the published data.
Awesome. I love that. And we've been talking a lot about, say, psilocybin, but also, do you microdose coach with what plant medicines do you use, or what is your what should I say, apothecary for your clients?
Yeah, usually my main apothecary is psilocybin mushrooms. So I help people facilitate their microdosing of usually psilocybin, magic mushrooms, all of that stuff. I help them with other types of non-psychoactive plant medicines, like integrating into their microdosing protocol, like reishi mushrooms or lion's mane, or like those medicinal type of mushrooms. It really does help the process. I do have experience doing like Wachuma or San Pedro, like that type of plant medicine, and like integrating that into a protocol, which is a little bit different. But primarily, my expertise is around psilocybin magic mushrooms. I have microdosed in the past with LSD, but I don't really facilitate people having like microdosing experiences with LSD, just primarily plant medicines.
Awesome. You're just reminding me, I was speaking to you maybe a year ago or a while ago, and I think you were maybe trying experimenting with microdosing DMT. Is
Mhm.
that you?
Yeah,
Are
so
we
I've
keeping
I've
this in?
yeah, so I've never facilitated like microdosing with DMT with clients or anything, but I have experimented with microdosing DMT for myself, and it is quite effective, and it really helps like a it literally facilitates like a energetic reset, I would
Mm,
say, of the system because it's so quick, and so because it lasts only like a microdose of DMT really lasts like 5-10 minutes max.
yeah.
And so really I kind of go about like the same protocol of just setting my intention for the little mini experience or like the microdosing of DMT. I take like a little bit of DMT and then I just let myself meditate through the experience, and then I just let the my body just kind of relax into the experience and just kind of wash away anything that I feel like is heavy in my system or not really aligned with like kind of where I want to be, how I want to be feeling in my body. And it's really effective at helping me do that. Of course, like I don't have any formal training or experience with that. It's been more experimental, but I would say that's kind of like been my experience microdosing DMT. I would say it's definitely effective, at least for me, experientially, but I have yet to actually like help clients facilitate of that type of thing.
Well, I have you to thank for that because I remember like, how are you going to microdose DMT? That's not a thing you microdose. And I'm like, I have to find that out. And then I tried that just with it was a pen a friend had, and I was like, oh, okay. And I dropped in, and you had described that kind of just meditating and seeing where in the body you might be feeling unease or just relax and
Mhm.
surrender to it. And I was like, oh, that's how you do that. Okay. And it was from
Yeah.
you. So thank you.
Yeah.
Um, and the other aspect of it is like, I, I being with a coach, I want to be with someone that's also on the cutting edge of experimenting with their own, like that's our God-given right, I believe, to experiment with our own consciousness and to, I think
Mhm.
that's what we're supposed to do is where's the edge? And there is no edge if we're constantly, continuously ever expanding. But I want to be around people that are called to do that, constantly seek
Right.
and like be satisfied without having to know the end because there is no end, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah, and that brings up actually something interesting that just came to my mind as well, is that experimenting and doing kind of intuitive dosing is fine, is great for people who are more experienced with microdosing, who really have gone about like extensive protocols, have done like many different types of journeys with microdosing and kind of have a handle on how the different types of microdosing can affect them and how they can go about their day with it in their system, and that's like perfectly fine. What I would say is for people who are just starting out microdosing, consistency is more important for them because when people are starting to microdose for the first time, it's really important to get into a consistent rhythm with the medicine, because if they try to do intuitive dosing right off the bat, they're really, what I observe most of the time is what I mentioned earlier, is that people start to dose only on their hard days or want to dose when they're stressed, when they're only stressed. And they're like, oh, I feel like I might be stressed today. I'm going to take a microdose today. And so they are kind of microdosing like that. But it's really important for people who are first starting microdosing to really facilitate that change in neuroplasticity in the brain, to stick with a consistent protocol, which also involves potentially working with a coach to keep you accountable to that consistent protocol.
That's great. And I think that you were addressing that in one of your videos about red flags that no one really talks about. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that was one of the red flags is that dosing for then you're coding it to be that attachment again to something else. What are the other red flags that no one really talks about? You had some good ones.
Yeah, the I remember it from the video made. It was the second one is dosing to dosing to and expecting it to fix something right off the bat. Because I think a lot of people have this perception that microdosing is kind of like taking like a magical pill or something, and then all of a sudden they'll be like rejuvenated or they'll be healed, or it will like eradicate some sort of feeling that they don't want to feel right off the bat and like get rid of it. And so it's like the magical pill phenomenon or the magical pill misconception is like a huge red flag that I see with a lot of people who are like, oh, I want to start microdosing. And then I kind of probe a little bit more into like why they want to microdose. And then they're just like, well, I think it's just a really great solution for getting rid of this or getting rid of that. And I'm just like, well, yes, but are we looking to get rid of it instantly, or are you willing to work through it to finally like manage it and integrate that management? And so it's like first exploring with clients like where they're at with microdosing and noticing like what if they're kind of leaning towards that misconception. My job as a coach is to kind of bring them back to reality and kind of talk with them and through how they want to actually use microdosing to better start feeling those feelings, not avoiding them, not like using it as a magic pill to eradicate those things. And so that's number two. And number three is um, increasing your dose after your first day of microdosing without proper calibration. And so, what I mean by that is, I see a lot of people, like my clients, that come to me and they start their microdosing protocol after their first day, and then after their first day, they message me and just like, "Hey, Eric, I think I want to increase my dosage. I didn't feel anything," and I'm just like, okay, we should probably talk about that. Is there a reason you feel like you should increase your dosage right off the bat? It's like, well, I just want to feel something. I didn't really feel anything. Well, it's perfectly normal not to feel anything your first time right out the gate. The process is really getting used to, microdosing even at the lowest level, and you may not feel anything right off the bat. And you might like microdose like a few days, and you might not feel anything until maybe the third or the fourth day of microdosing, and that's completely normal. It's like, again, it's subperceptual, and people might not notice it right off the bat. And the process is a matter of like noticing what actually comes up like during those days. It takes time. So the one obviously the red flag is like if someone wants to increase their dosage right off the bat to feel something, and that's telling me that like is there a reason that person wants to feel something right off the bat? Are they just wanting to get that high or get that, that feeling of, being in that psychedelic headspace? If that's true, well, maybe we can look at like, if you have experience with psychedelics or plant medicine, maybe they can look at macrodosing if they're like looking at something like that. But usually for people who are starting out with any psychedelic experience, and they're just like, I didn't feel anything, I want to increase my dosage. It's a matter of working with them to understand how they can work with the subtleties for the first few days. And then after days like 3 and 4, ask them like, okay, like, how have you been feeling? Like, what have you been noticing? And then from there, we can discuss the process of calibration, which is like increasing the dosage gradually, maybe like 25 milligrams at a time, to see what is their ideal dosage to experience like what they're really needing or wanting to experience, depending on the intention that they set.
Beautiful. And then again, I have like 18 questions that came out of that. But one thing that I liked that you really addressed was strain does matter. And a lot of people don't know this because they don't even, it's a magic mushroom. I don't know, but there's, almost nearly infinite kinds and strains and with names that you wouldn't believe, named by like a horny teenage boy or something. So, how does the strain affect the microdose and the microdoser? How should they pick based on their self and what they're looking to achieve?
Yeah, and again, this is why having a microdosing facilitator and coach is so important, because they really know the ins and outs of like a good amount of different strains. Like I would say as a microdosing coach and facilitator, I definitely haven't had experience with all like 200 plus strains of
Yeah,
magic mushroom. I've had a good experience with a handful, but like
yeah.
I definitely haven't had experience, and I don't think many facilitators out there have had, experiences with all 200 plus and growing strains of mushroom. I think that would just be like absurd. So
Full-time
if
job.
like a microdosing facilitator had to have experiences with all 200 plus 200 plus strains of mushroom, I think just having a good experience with a handful can be really helpful in helping guide clients in terms of what they can start selecting depending on the intentions that they set for their journey. So for example, if like my one client that I have, she's really wanting to stay really resilient in her working environment with coworkers, because sometimes she can be really stressed and she wants to like up her resiliency or not become so affected by the stress in her working environment. And so she's microdosing to help that process. And so depending, so given that intention, I could recommend like a certain mushroom that actually might guide her in terms of how she can increase her resilience. And one mushroom that, I really like working with in terms of resilience is Golden Teacher, because it like helps you maintain like a really Zen state. It can teach you how to get into a more relaxed and Zen state. And there's a reason they call it Golden Teachers, because I think the spirit of the actual fungi is a little bit of a teacher. It kind of pushes you a little bit, but it's actually subtle. It's subtle, but it's gentle. It's subtle and gentle kind of teachings as you go about your day. And that's kind of what I've experienced with Golden Teacher. It's usually what other people have kind of claimed around Golden Teacher experiences. And so, based on the experiences that I've had with that medicine, I can recommend what might be more energetically aligned with a client depending on their intention going into their experience. And so, the other analogy that I love to equate mushrooms with is making the analogy of mushrooms are like dogs, and mushroom strains are like different dog breeds. If you think about it, different dog breeds all have their, own personality, characteristics, temperament. Same with mushroom strains. Each mushroom strain has their own type of energy they bring to an experience. So like if you really vibe with like a golden retriever who, they're typically very playful and loving and loyal, then like you might feel aligned with a certain type of mushroom strain that is a little bit more playful, gives you a little bit more energy, and is a little bit more vibey. And so but there might be a different type of mushroom like penis envy, which is a little bit more of an unpredictable strain, a very powerful strain. That might be a little bit more like a Siberian husky, which can be a little bit more unpredictable at times, and still very, loyal and loving, but can be a little bit more unpredictable. Can kind of exhibit kind of um, that kind of trickster energy sometimes. And so that's kind of the analogy I love to, use when it comes to, working with different mushroom strains, because when you work with different types of dog breeds, you're obviously getting a different type of experience with each type of dog, right? And so same with mushroom strain. And it's just when you're working with a particular intention, it's always good to select or work with a coach to help you determine what type of mushroom strain would work best in that situation.
Awesome. And that's a great analogy, a great way to frame it so people are like, oh, and they think of their own dog maybe like, oh, okay, I got this.
Yeah.
Um, Now just to kind of bring it back to the reality of some people's experiences when they start microdosing or when they're on their microdosing journey. I'm Canadian, you're in the States. Our two countries are very involved with cannabis, right? And
Mm.
Texas, you might have noticed, is different than California, and where I'm from, every street corner now has some like cannabis store on it. And growing up, you had to like score this from a guy and smoke it behind a hay bale. And now it's like, do you want purple Mountain Dew or do you want like it's not the master plant that it was, now it's kind of a
Mhm.
bastardized version of like get as high as you can, sit on the couch, eat the whole bag of Doritos, and then do it again tomorrow. So a lot of people ask me, it's one of the most common questions for my Canadian clients is like, can I still like have my edibles? Can I still have weed with it? How will that affect my microdosing? Do you find that with some of your clients in the States?
It's funny because I haven't really experienced any clients who have, because most of my clients are new microdosers and
Okay.
new to any sort of substances.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so I experience having or getting a lot of clients who don't really have experience with marijuana, with like mushrooms, with anything. And so they're kind of trying mushrooms for the first time. Whereas, when it comes to marijuana, what I would say around that is if I did get a client that was asking, can I still, have edibles with like microdosing? I would say if they're new to microdosing, I would say probably cut out the edibles while you begin your first microdosing protocol. Once you get more experience with microdosing and once you feel a little bit like like experienced and have had a few like years, I would say, under your
Mhm.
belt with like microdosing the plant, then you may can add like, hints of cannabis into that. But what I would say is like cannabis can really affect the energy in the experience. Like it's kind of if you're in the portal wanting the downloads, the insights to come from the mushroom spirit, it can sometimes get convoluted with like the messages and everything that comes into play with like marijuana, with cannabis, like the spirit of ganja, I would say.
Mhm.
That's the actual like plant of like marijuana, and it's a little bit more of a sticky energy, and so that's even why a lot of like mentors that I worked with, including Kat, like plant medicine people, typically doesn't recommend taking edibles or working with ganja right before or even immediately after an ayahuasca ceremony, because the
Oh.
spirit of ganja can really convolute the experience and make it a little difficult to work with.
Yeah, I experienced that. I didn't know that it would kind of pop you back in there, and I experienced that. I can speak to that. But yeah, and I appreciate that. I want to help people when they do have that question, like you want to isolate the benefits of one of these intelligent earth medicine teachers at a time. And also, um, I think the spirit of Ganja is she's a goddess, and she also wants to be dominant, and she will dominate the experience of fungi if she has the opportunity to. But when really had with reverence and intention, the two can coalesce and speak and come and give you
Mhm.
excellent advice. But I like how you said after a while, don't try to like, oh, well, I can do, just
Yeah.
reverence is such a crucial ingredient there. But thank you for that answer. Now you work a lot with like leaders, with high achievers, and that's important to denote. Like many people are kind of switching on to the idea of, the movie Limitless, that microdosing LSD and psilocybin and some
I've
of
heard of
these.
it.
Yeah, yeah. But so
Yeah,
people are kind
I
of
have
like,
heard of it. I haven't seen it though.
okay. It basically this guy has this indescribed kind of pill and can see all of the answers all at once, and people are like, well, maybe microdosing
Mhm.
can do that for me. But we are seeing things in Silicon Valley, the coders, the designers, that microdosing LSD, a derivative of fungus, a ergot, is switching people's brains on to be
Mhm.
able to go deep into analytical findings and again weave those through to their conscious creative minds. So you're helping these high achievers, architects, high level people. um, why do they love microdosing? Like how do they benefit from it specifically?
Yeah, I would say to start out, like microdosing is wonderful for people who are wanting to enhance their ability to be more creative at work and like weave that into more of their personal lives as well. But I do see a lot of high achievers using substances like LSD to be a little bit more productive because LSD is a little bit more stimulating, and so it can allow people to be a little bit more productive, focused, like at work specifically. What I would say, which I think is great, but at the same time, when I work with people who are high achievers who want to really get the benefit of microdosing at work, and because I work with primarily like psilocybin, is starting to develop more of a reverent relationship with the medicine as opposed to treating it like a hack or like a productivity mechanism,
Yeah.
because then it becomes less of an ally or less of a consciousness and more of just a tool that we use for our own benefit. There's no reciprocity, there's no reverence. And so what I'm observing with a lot of people in Silicon Valley, they're just like, well, I'm just going to microdose. Like it could be psilocybin, it could be LSD, but I'm just going to take it. They just, pop the capsule or take the spray or however they administer it and just go about their day and just like use it for what it's worth. And that is that kind of process or that perspective can be like very consumption based. I think like it's really based in like an idea or mindset of consumption. Like I just like it motivates or encourages the our consumption based reality of going about microdosing to enhance our own productivity at work, to gain more money, to get more power, to like all of this stuff can be really tricky to sometimes navigate for, high achievers who, you are primarily driven by huge egos sometimes.
Yeah.
And so how can we start, bringing them back down to earth, educating them around the consciousness of the plants that they are working with, even with LSD, because you mentioned the derivative from ergot, the fungus, like it's like derived from the earth. It's derived from like a plant. And so how can we start educating them around what they're taking actually does have consciousness. It has like this power to it that we really have to respect and show this mutual kind of reciprocity with. Like it's not so much around constantly producing and doing and consuming. It's really taking a step back and how can we just be with the energy? How can we be in communion with the spirit? How can we learn from it? How can we, make this a two-way street? And so I like that perspective and bringing that perspective more into the microdosing protocol because it's really about developing a deeper relationship with the consciousness of plants and with the earth, which is what we all need. We don't need to be constantly, on this, consumption based train that we're on as a society because that's not sustainable. We really have to return back to the earth. And I think approaching microdosing in that mindset or in that perspective is very important, especially for those people who are very driven by ego and also, high and are also high achieving.
I love that you said that. Reciprocity is huge, reverence is huge. And I think for some people, they might get that kind of slap in the face if they do have the deeper dive ceremony and they are communing with the spirit of these of the consciousnesses of these plants, this fungus, and then they're one way or another, the polarities will come together and you'll figure it out like, oh, I was abusing this, and you'll be shown that. And it can come easily or it can come at the way, whatever way it comes, but it will even out. So I like that you highlighted that. And I think that's a really good segue to like, I got an email today and it said like, about the microdosing movement. It's estimated to be a $73 billion like industry by the end of this year. And that is mind-blowing, given the fact that it's still an underground, like it's still the war on drugs, and yet it's still at $73 billion. So where do you think this is headed? What do you think the risks are and the precautions that we should be taking as conscious humans that want to support the integrity, intelligence, intellect, the beautiful aspects of plants and fungus? What should we be doing? What do you think about this movement?
Yeah, that's such an important and great question. Well, my intuition is that this space is going to continue booming And probably next year, it's going to be probably even, it's going to be twice the market cap, you know, and then in 3 years, it'll be 10 times. Like it's just going to continue going up as, as people term the psychedelic renaissance or people being more open to plant medicines, it's going to start booming and people are going to start turning to microdosing as their primary way to mitigate like health concerns and help them start developing kind of relationships with back to the earth. But I also feel like because there's so much money around this movement and money equals power, we have to be very careful because I think like the more this expands, the more that people are going to start wanting to people are going to start wanting to put more money in their pocket, essentially, especially like the big corporations, the big businesses, the psychedelic elites, as I call it. They're going to start wanting to um, creating more of a way to extract as much money from the system as possible. And in order to do that, it's about, creating something that's more consumptive, more consumption based. And so that people can constantly like be buying and buying and buying these medicines without taking a step back and really honoring where they're coming from. How can we honor the indigenous traditions that are like, that have provided this medicine for us, that continue to provide this medicine for us, and really respect how all of this medicine is grown. Because I definitely don't want my psilocybin, my magic mushrooms, to be grown in a lab where, it's like a very sad environment where they're not getting a lot of nutrients, like a lot of care and support, and therefore getting like a product where it's stripped, it's like raped of, its consciousness, its reverence. And so I really see that's a huge danger and a risk of this field expanding. But that's really our responsibility and job as microdosing coaches, is to be aware of that past to help, you know, educate the planet, because it's going to be a lot of people. It's going to be a wide percentage of people around the globe feeling interested or called or curious to work with plant medicines and psychedelics, and, engaging in microdosing as to kind of dip their toe into the water for in terms of that curiosity. So I think for microdosing coaches, it's like we're on the front lines essentially and helping people initially understand that this is a relationship. It's not, a something that is meant to be based in consumption. We should really think about how we can start developing more of a relationship with these medicines, as opposed to just thinking about them like productivity hacks or tools. I personally like to refer to these medicines as allies because it gives them that sense of consciousness.
Yeah, that word actually came up in a meditation the first time I really connected with Amanita. It was like ally, teacher, friend, like soul connection. And I really love sharing with clients is like, don't just pop this pill in your kitchen. Like this is a spiritual supplement and you're connecting to a highly, highly, highly intelligent being. So that reverence is always imperative for your highest experience with these medicines. So again, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's a great time on the planet right now that people are waking up to this stuff. And people like Brian Johnson, like ultra billionaire obsessed with youth, has just put out his whole experience. You would have seen it on having like a 5 gram experience. How do you feel? Like, what do you think about like microdosing helping people look and feel younger as like an anti-aging jam? And he, especially with his billions of dollars, is able to show the science behind it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a huge and amazing benefit of, plant medicines and specifically magic mushrooms or psilocybin. That's like they're finding that it, especially in the science, that these psilocybin is helping like cells like live longer, like 50% longer, I think is like one of the statistics in scientific literature. And so we're starting to find lots of data, or we're starting to come across lots of data and finding lots of insights that psychedelics, plant medicines can really help us look and stay younger over the long term. And even in my own experience, I feel like I have experienced that. Like the minute that I started my journey with plant medicines, I felt like I started going back in time in terms of my own physical appearance, my kind of emotional energy, everything. Kind of my youth started like coming back, and I just don't think it's a coincidence that plant medicine kind of helped facilitate that for me over time. And so personally and experientially, I do believe that psilocybin is like a wonderful molecule that can enhance our radiance, enhance our beauty, maintain our youth, and all of that stuff. And we're even showing that in the scientific literature. So I think it's like an amazing thing to kind of look to this medicine to help us maintain that sense of youthfulness and beauty. And so when it comes to people feeling interested or called to microdosing, for instance, they might think of it as like, oh, I can get like more beautiful by microdosing. And I would just say potentially, but again, I think the more important thing is to start developing your relationship with the medicine. And then over time, you'll start to see that you're, depending on your intention or what you want out of the experience, it could be to reduce the amount of stress in your working environment, or just like help you feel more uplifted in your social interactions. Like it just depends on the experience, but it's always people always want a positive outcome, like from their microdosing journey. And so that positive outcome usually allows us to feel a lot less stressed and a lot less bogged down. And so that naturally might help us feel and look more youthful over time. So it could be that the microdose or like the plant medicine may directly be helping us like look or feel more beautiful or more youthful, but it can also exhibit like an indirect effect where we are reducing our overall stress or becoming more aligned with ourselves over time, which then helps us um, go about selecting more appropriate food choices for some more healthy food choices, or or wanting to engage in more exercise, or wanting to do more self-care. And in those practices, that obviously can have an effect on our own physical health and our beauty and our youthfulness. And so it could work both ways. I'm not sure which way it could go, or which way it actually does work. It could be both, but I would say there is a lot of potential in this area for microdosing to definitely make us feel more youthful, and not just microdosing, but just psilocybin in general could actually do this.
Dude, absolutely. While you were describing that, this little whatever giddy little being I have in me that is I'm assimilating to the mushrooms was like namasteing with you, that like the psilocybin in you sees the psilocybin in me, and the psilocybin in me sees the
Yeah.
psilocybin in you. And really you do want to, you start to think like your food. We become what we eat, we become what we consume. And psilocybin, mushrooms, fungus in general wants the most efficient pathway to something. They want to take what's dead and dying, decaying, and convert it into the most nutrient dense nutrients. So we want to have more healthy consumption. We want to have the green stuff that's going to make you radiate. We want to have better sleep. We want to have better conversations. We don't want to watch violence so much. So I think that's almost without a doubt is 100%. It makes us not just anti-age, but more vital in the years that we do have. And when you were describing that, it was such a like, yep, 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 yep. That's right. That's right. Like it was confirming what you were saying in me. So thank you for
Yeah.
that.
And it's just like it's an amazing benefit, and I'm excited to see what more scientific literature and data kind of comes out on that phenomenon because I think it has potential for sure.
Absolutely. I'm reminded like of a retreat I was at in Guatemala. You know, the water quality wasn't the best. And there was one day, like every single person got sick, and we were all eating the same vegetarian meals, the same, like they had great water cleaning and everything. But I just happened to be taking like ridiculous amounts of reishi. And I was the only one that didn't get sick. Just maybe like 8 reishi
Wow.
a day. And I was the only one that didn't get sick. And it was just such a like, yeah, this is the mushrooms. Um, Now we have a little bit of time left, and I wondered if you would want to share perhaps one of the most profound or intense or intriguing experiences that you have had with our either fungal or plant allies that you would want to share that maybe had taught you something that your biggest lesson or maybe your biggest kick in the guts or whatever just had the most profound effect on you. Would you be comfortable sharing something like that?
Hmm. Yeah, the first one that comes to mind is I really feel like psilocybin and specifically going about the process of microdosing psilocybin has allowed me to feel safe to access grief. And the reason I feel like this is so important is because grief, I believe, is the emotion of transformation. It's a really important emotion for us to feel so that way we can really process the fear of letting go, the something that has been lost. And it's something that can really, cripple us and really, it's like an emotion that we usually don't like to feel. We don't like to feel grief. But the moment that we do feel grief, it's something that can be very extraordinary for our entire system because it is an extremely potent release of energy. And so when it comes to grief and my relationship with psilocybin, how it helped me kind of through that is because I always pushed grief down because I always was like the kind of this high achiever, this pleaser, this like corporate leader who when I experience any sort of loss or any sort of heartbreak or anything like that, I just pushed that emotion down, or I just pretended to that it wasn't that big of a deal. And I just wanted to continue forward because that's what I, felt like I needed to do. Because there was a lot of fear around, like, I had lots of insecurities around my own, what I was capable of and like where and how I got to where I was like at like these very prestigious companies like Airbnb and Facebook. I felt like, I had made it to the top and like I cannot like compromise where I am because I've really am now climbing the ladder. And so I was this high achiever. I had to just go, go, go all the time. And so I didn't really feel like I had time to grieve or like if stuff came up around that, then I just needed to push that down because that would slow me down. And so going through the process of microdosing and psilocybin, it really taught me how to start embracing that grief rather than suppressing it. It kind of started bringing all of that grief up to the surface and allowing me to process it over time. And in that process, I just felt this huge, just bodily transformation where I felt like I was able to really connect a lot more with my intuition, connect a lot more with my guides, my angels, my ancestors. Like I just felt more attuned to so much more spirituality that was like around me at all times that I had, blocked out. But really releasing this grief over time really created this portal in which I could start to um, really connect with things that were really important to me, including my grandmother who passed about 10 years ago. But when she did pass, I was in that state where I would, suppressed a lot of that grief. I didn't want to feel the depth of how much like, her passing like affected me and the loss of it. And so I just didn't want to acknowledge it or really want to process that grief because it was too painful. And I didn't want to slow myself down at that time because it was about achieving at that time. And so when I really got to the truth of the matter and started really processing that grief, I started really becoming a lot more aware of my love and my potential to love other people and how I could start doing that more often. And in a sense, like allowing myself to shed that grief and transform it into a more a frequency of love was really powerful, and it allowed me to just really blossom while I was on my own journey with psilocybin.
Wow, that's big. And grief is something so many people just push down because, just like you said, we don't have time for it. You feel like if you start to open the doors of letting a few tears come out, then that the dams are going to break down all your walls. And sometimes that's what we need. And
Mm,
I love telling people when they first start on their microdosing journey, like, have a day to yourself in case they do break. You're allowed to
mhm.
break and let yourself break completely. Let your one of my mentors says, let your heart break completely because it's momentum and it's movement forward. And I really love that. So thank you for sharing that. Grief is such an important emotion that we try to hide and put under the bed, and it will always
Mhm.
come up. It's just a matter of how you let it. So thank
Yeah.
you for that. In kind of closing, I want to ask you two more questions. One is going to be, have you had a book or a quote or maybe a person or a sentiment that has changed you, shaped you, um, really stayed with you? And the other one, maybe first, is if you could go back to, I want to say little doctor, little Dr. Eric Russell, or little Eric, and give him some advice, knowing this path that you've gone through and this incredible, you wouldn't have thought you'd have gone down a path of psychedelics, perhaps. What advice would you give to this young man about to set out for this journey called life?
Mm, great questions. So I would say the person that I most look up to right now is actually my boss, Kat Courtney, CEO of Plant Medicine People. She's just been like such a guiding light and such a role model for me, like on this path. And I respect and love everything that she has to offer around plant medicine. She's such a powerful leader and advocate for the plants, and she has like years and years of experience working with not only ayahuasca but multiple other types of plant allies. And so a lot of her sayings and the book that she wrote on plant medicine, she's written the Plant Medicine Mystery School book. I'm pretty sure you can find out on Amazon, one of my favorite books on plant medicines. And I just think like everything that she refers to and she says in her book is extraordinary. So I couldn't recommend her teachings, what she offers, her retreats enough to people who are curious
Mhm.
about them.
Wow. And I want to promote
And
that book also. And also all her memes that are on that
yes,
the page. I'm like, yep, double like triple
yeah.
fire emoji. Yeah, 100% with you. But that's so great. I don't think that's a boss anymore. I think that's a leader. And that's
hmm
amazing that you found each other. So thank you for that.
Totally, totally. And then the last question in regards to what I would tell my younger self is the younger Eric is to probably just follow your intuition and not be afraid. Because I think on my path of pursuing plant medicines and psychedelics, I always had this hesitancy. I always had this intuition of pursuing it, but I always um, didn't trust that intuition, or I didn't like follow through, or I kind of was more listening to my mind as
Mhm.
opposed to my heart. And so the thing that I would, impart on my younger self is to really just follow your heart, not so much your head, but your heart, and not be afraid because there's just so much beauty and magic and wonder awaiting you on this path.
Oh, that is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And I hope that this is the first of many conversations that we'll have, because it's been an absolute pleasure. And I literally could talk to you for the rest of the day. So I hope to have you on as a guest again. Thank you so much, Dr. Eric Russell.
Yes, thank you so much, Shannon. It was an honor and really, really appreciate you having me on your podcast. It was great and I loved our conversation. So thank you so much.